So, what is your name and how did you?
I'm Judy Adler. I was born and raised in Wisconsin. Grew up in Kenosha. Went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Spent a brief time out in D.C. before I came back and got married. We moved up to Shawano, and then my husband went to graduate school at the University of Michigan. And it was there, as we were moving back to his new position in Janesville, that I contacted the Janesville League to ask them who are our representatives. So, what else would you like to know?
Well, what have you done in your life? What sort of work have you done? And
A variety of things. I won't go into the part-time jobs as a student, but when I was first married, I taught for a year in Shawano, taught second grade. That was a very interesting thing. It gives me a lot of sympathy for teachers. Because they have to work awfully hard. Nobody really knows that. In Michigan, I worked for the Institute for Social Research at the Center for Research on the Utilization of Scientific Knowledge, commonly called CRUSC.
okay.
After a few years here in Janesville, I went back to graduate school and got a degree in planning. And while I was at school, I worked for Rock County as a planner, and then I was hired by the city of Janesville as community development, in their community development department, which has changed its name but not its function over the many years. But basically, I became a grants administrator.
Okay.
And learned a lot about following rules and laws and other things we can go into at some point if you really want.
Well, have you always been engaged in civic activities?
As I said, when I moved to Janesville, one of the first things I did, actually before we moved, I wanted to know who our representatives were. And after I got to Janesville, I got a call from Nancy Stabb, who was league president at the time, inviting me to a meeting. And so I came to the meeting and I immediately joined League. So I guess I've been involved in one way or another for many years.
Do you consider yourself more of an advocate or an activist?
A bit of both, I think. Also in '73, with the help of a lot of League friends, I ran for the school board. Ran for office, ran for school board. I like to say I helped Tim Bolton get elected because I think that was the year they had 4 members going on to the school board that year.
Okay.
I came in 6th or so. I think there were 8 or 9 of us running.
Well, that's good that there was a big,
it was a
lot of candidates.
Big candidates, yeah.
What prompted your interest to get engaged in the League?
Well, when I moved to Janesville, I didn't know anybody, and I did get involved with some groups, and I didn't really want to sit around talking to women about husbands, babies, and cooking. And the League seemed to have the right mix of intellectual conversation plus personal relationships.
You said that Nancy Staff had asked you to join.
Yeah.
How did you learn about League?
As I said, I had contacted, somehow I don't even know how I did it, contacted League to ask about who were the elected representatives. And from that, they got my name and number.
Well, that's how you got into the League. What has kept you in the League for 50-some years?
A lot of it is personal relationships. One of the changes that has come about over the years is in how League performs. In the early years, This is the early 70s, maybe even into the 80s. A lot of the emphasis was on study and discussion and coming up with positions. And it was very much a grassroots process. At the time I joined, the format was there were 2 meetings a month. There were what was called unit meetings. There was a group that met on Monday afternoons, one group met on Tuesday mornings, and one group met on Wednesday evenings. And they all discussed the same things, and each group came to the consensus, and then all of that was combined into a single consensus for the entire local league. And then that was sent on to the state or the national as needed. Frequently there'd be an evening meeting where there'd be a guest speaker about a topic. We did a lot of different things. And I was just looking at some of the papers I was going to give you. We looked at fair trade, the whole trade, and what kind of international trade is going on in the city of Janesville. We did studies on education, we did studies on water, we did studies international relations. So there were a lot of different things to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And because you met frequently and you met in each other's homes, you got to know people individually. And by meeting in smaller groups, you had very civil discussions. Sometimes a lot of arguments, but very civil discussions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what I miss. You know, we don't have that same grassroots activity these days.
Mm-hmm. So we can talk about more about that as we go on here. What issues were of greatest interest to you when you first joined the league?
Oh, I think I was interested in most of them or all of them. Everything from international relations to multicultural diversity in the schools to historic preservation.
Have your interests changed over time?
No, I'm still interested in a lot of things.
All those things. How do you think the league has strategies for taking action on an issue has changed over time?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is there seems to be much more emphasis on action than on study. And I think we forget that we really need the study to focus our action and to underpin what we're trying to do. If you want people to take action on diversity, you really need to understand the background and why it's important. Thinking back, there's the local league has a position on multicultural diversity in the school system. And we did a study, we went to the school board, but we didn't really follow through as much as we could have. This position is 20 years old or more, and they still haven't done anything.
The school board.
The school board.
Okay.
The school system. I mean, we still have an issue that right now the number of minority students far outnumbers the number of minority faculty or staff.
Mm-hmm.
And why is this? And what are we doing about that? And why weren't we pushing for it all these years?
Okay.
But we all get busy.
I imagine that's contributed to some of the changes in the league over time.
Yeah.
The 3 meetings, the meetings during the day.
Well, the meetings during the day, the Monday afternoon group was primarily retired women.
Okay.
The Tuesday morning was another group of younger younger members with children, but they, have dealt with their child care needs, whatever. I went to the Wednesday night group because that's met my child care needs. One of the ways we worked is for each of the emphasis areas, whether it was social policy, population, international relations, whatever, there'd be a study committee. And the study committee would provide the discussion leader and the resource person for each of the units. And that's one of the neat things about League is, it's discussion leader training. So a whole bunch of women got knowledgeable on how to lead a group discussion. Discussion leader would lead the discussion. The resource person would be knowledgeable on the topic and would be able to throw in bits of information as needed, if whatever. National helped out immensely with the study papers they provided.
I was going to ask who had provided the materials.
The study papers were invariably well written and talked about both sides of an issue. So it wasn't all one-sided, what have you. And what I like about it is that it was grassroots. Your local league came up with its position. It was combined with the positions from all the state positions, results were then combined into the national one. So if there wasn't general consensus among all of the league members, it never made it to a policy statement.
That's before I became a member of the league.
It's quite different from another organization where they would, at the national convention, they would say, okay, what do you think of this position? And you'd be a yay or an A and no chance to really think about it from your local perspective.
Well, thank you. That's interesting. How would you characterize what you have contributed to the league, great or small? What do you think you have added to the league, either at the local or state or national level?
Okay. About a year after I first joined, I got asked to be the publicity chair. And so it was my job to write up a squib, get it to the paper, and I think the president might have thought I was harassing her because I'd call and say, well, what is going to be the topic of the discussion next week?
But you needed to give that to the paper.
Yeah, because I wanted to do my job and get it out to the paper. I've been on the board a number of times. In '75, I was asked to be local president. And so I took a 2-year term, which was very interesting because as local president, you get to go to the national convention. And I went along with the president from the Beloit League. And right now I'm drawing a blank, and I really shouldn't because she was nice. And we took the train out to D.C. And at the National Convention that year, they did a pre-convention tour in Philadelphia. So we had to stop off in Philadelphia.
This is 1976, or 75, 76?
76, I believe. So anyway, I've been on the board for the local league, I don't know how many times and how long, but served at least 3 terms as treasurer, maybe 4.
Okay. What personal or other skills are needed today to make the league successful, do you think?
Skills, listening, being able to talk civilly, having the resources to study an issue from all sides.
What, in your perspective of being in the league for 50-some years, what has
This
the
was
league?
just yesterday I joined.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's surprising, and
Yeah.
that there are 4 of you in this neighborhood that are 50
Well,
years.
I'm the recent
You're the
mover
newbie,
to-
huh?
newbie in the neighborhood, yes.
What has the league done well? Where has it fallen short? And where should it direct its energy going forward?
Well, I think it still does well in terms of action on issues. I think locally we could do better meeting in small groups. I guess one of the things that concern me is we've lost the having every member think about an issue. Some of our recent updates have been a committee got together and did the discussing, perhaps not at a time when everybody could attend, or they didn't make the effort to have a number of options for people to discuss,
Okay.
and then just brought it up at the annual meeting saying, here's what we think, what do you think? I think that should be done better.
Okay. What about going forward? Where do you think the league should be directing its energy going forward?
Oh. Well, you know, I don't know if they're doing lively issues anymore, because I've been off the board for a while. But again, that was grassroots. What does your local league think we should be doing? Combine that with other local leagues, the state, for the state concerns, and nationally.
Okay.
So I think we need to get back to the grassroots I think we've missed that.
Okay. In what ways has the league changed since you joined 50 years ago? You've been talking to some extent about this already, but do you see a change in the composition of the membership? Do you think the league's more or less inclusive than it has been when you first joined? How do you think the perception of the league in the public eye has changed over time?
I think the league is still very respected, and I think that's very important. I think because it tries to be, it bases things on study and rational decisions rather than jumping on the latest bandwagon. How has it changed? You know, every organization depends on its membership reaching out to include other members. And I guess that's all I want to say at
Okay.
this point.
All right. Thanks. Have you grown personally in any way that you might attribute to your time and experience in the league?
Well, I think one of the things, because of the early discussion leader training and just the way it operates, is being able to speak out in public. Of course, that's also a factor of my job, where I also had to do presentations to council and things. But when I look around and I see teachers, retired teachers, whatever, who are not comfortable speaking in public, that bothers me.
It's sometimes said that league brings out leadership qualities in members that who weren't fully aware of their skills.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know of cases where that's been true, that league has helped develop leadership in members?
Well, if you consider the number of our members that have run for council and have been on the city council over the years, Isla Hartog, Marilyn Jensen on the county board, Nancy Stabb way early on the city council, Kay Dupree on the city council.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think without league they probably would
Wouldn't have
not
done
have
it.
run for these offices.
All right, thank you. Do you have anything that you would like to share or say to others who are thinking about joining the league today?
join it, you'll have fun.
What might a new member expect to encounter when they join the league?
I don't know. Because, as you say, league has changed. We don't have the meetings, we don't have the public forums that we used to have. Yeah. Frankly, one of the reasons I went to graduate school in planning is we had a public forum, and one of the speakers, I think, or at least one of the attendees, happened to be the wife of the professor in the planning department at the University of Wisconsin. And after the meeting, she said to me, my husband is working on getting more women involved in planning and ensuring that there are more women in the class.
So it's something you hadn't really considered before talking with her?
You thought about what you want to do, and I got my bachelor's in international relations because I wanted to travel the world. Well, I figured, I'll stick to the country instead.
What would be your advice to a new member?
As I said, I'm not sure because I think I would rather have advice to the board, which is to really think about how you're involving the membership in your activities and what kind of training and background you're giving to members. Not just asking them to sign a petition or hold up a sign or whatever, but what kind of education are you giving them?
Thank you. Do you have any photos of yourself or activities in League that you'd like to share or speak about? Some particular memories?
No, I don't have any photographs at this time, but you have spurred me on to think about going through those 6 boxes of photographs and figuring out what's there and deciding what to do with them. I think one of the greatest things has been all the number of national conventions I've been able to go to over the years. Boston in '92 was one of them. I've been to Texas. There was a convention in Houston. Washington, D.C., New York.
Was it Washington, D.C. and the bicentennial year must have been special?
I'm not sure if it was Washington or New York.
Okay.
It might have been New York.
Okay. But doing it in the bicentennial year, that must have been special.
Yeah, and I took the train out with Helen Forbeck.
Oh, okay.
And Helen was president of the Beloit League at the time. She then worked for Les Aspin in his office for many years. And so she got very much involved in politics then.
Yeah.
But just, you get friends locally and you get friends statewide. And I was just looking up, there's a thing called Travel Concepts International, and it's a travel with the league, and they did specialized travel, primarily starting with league members, and this has been going on for about 35 years now. And so I took one of their trips to Russia.
Wow.
With Marilyn Jensen, Gloria Ziegler, and Betty Forsland. And the 4 of us. And they didn't do the usual tour things. I mean, you got the tour things, but we visited a school, met with school kids. And this was in '92, when it was just opening up.
Okay, I was going to try to...
When there were a lot of food shortages. So they asked each of the travelers to bring a package of food to share with one of the students at the school. And they're still doing it. They take you to...
I've not heard of this. Travel Concepts.
Travel Concepts International, also called the Serious Traveler.
Okay. But it started with the league.
It started with the league, and at the time, with every reservation they had, they did a donation to National League.
Oh, that's neat.
but to see Russia, we went to Moscow and St. Petersburg, and just
With league members.
with league members, with
Cool.
like-minded league
Okay,
members.
all right.
We had a farewell dinner. We went in March. We had a farewell dinner on International Women's Day. First I'd ever heard of International
March
Women's
9th.
Day, where all the men presented you with a flower, a rose.
I know about International Women's Day, but I didn't know that was a
Yeah.
tradition in Russia. That's very
It
cool.
was, So there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of opportunities in League if you want to be active. The State Legislative Committee.
Mhm.
There are state committees on all the topics, but the Legislative Committee looks at state legislation in the works, public hearings, and reviews it according to the positions and how important the legislation is. And then they're the ones that come up with the time for action. So if they think it's important that league members know about this.
Thank you.
You had asked earlier about have I always been involved in politics, and I guess I forgot. I was my school's delegate to Badger Girls State.
Okay, so was I, except it was Cornhusker Girls State for me.
And unlike the boys who went to Ripon, the girls got to go to Madison.
Much
And so
better.
we actually had a session in the state legislature. And so I remember looking at a paper on one of the desks, and it was a resolution about Billy Broom, of a Braves player.
Okay, all right.
And we were very much into watching the Braves at that time.
Okay. Well, would you like to share any personal reflections on the history of women's suffrage and the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment? Do you think about suffragists very much as you work for the League today?
I think it's a very complicated history in that, yes, women finally got the suffrage after many, many years of working on it, unless you were Chinese, Native American, and all these other things that at the time I went to school they didn't really teach us about.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is how women became citizens. My grandmother is an American citizen not because she applied, but because her husband applied.
Okay.
So she was kind of brought along with him. Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to share that I haven't asked
I
you
don't know.
about?
I think I've covered just about everything.
Okay. Well, I sure appreciate you visiting with me, and it's so interesting to talk with women, league members, who've
Mhm.
been in the league for a long time and have seen how the league has
Yeah.
changed over time, how it's the same and how
Right.
it has changed.
You had asked about political involvement. I guess League did get me involved because in '72, I think it was, I was involved in was it the McGovern campaign?
I think that was 72, I think.
And I was the local treasurer for it.
Okay.
And that's when Carol Herzig she was involved in that as a teenager.
Okay. So you've brought in quite a few of the
Well, it's
members.
funny because she remembers me, but I don't remember her
Okay.
from that time. But
She was just this little twerp.
well, you're focused on what you're doing, and you don't pay much attention to whatever, I guess. But yeah,
And she's been in the league now for 40 some years.
I don't know. I've got some old membership books
Okay.
you can
Oh, okay, thank you.
look in, and there's some from '70s and '80s in there.
Great. That's what I want is more stuff in my basement.
Well, you probably had it in the president's files, but somebody may have gotten rid of them.
Thanks very much, Judy, for visiting with me today.